It was a bit of a bumpy start for Jordan Love in training camp, and on day 2, he rocked. Jayden Reed, a ghost on day 1. Day 2, he rocked. Training camp is different. It matters, but it's not real. I'll explain what I mean. Plus, Luke Musgrave is the latest in a small group of players in the Matt LaFleur era, drafted to come in right away and start. He's hoping to find more success than his predecessors there. All of that on today's show.
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts, you'll find Locked On Packers, the #1 Packers podcast on the internet. And the show for fans who know what happened, they want to know why and how. Thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers your first listen every day. We hope you like starting your day with us as much as we like starting our day with you. When it comes to the preseason, what I love to say is that it doesn't count, but it matters, because what happens in those preseason reps, it translates to the regular season in terms of, okay, at least this is NFL football, especially for rookies. And the good, the bad, that stuff, it's all part of the evaluation process. Even though the games don't count, performances still matter, even if they're not the end-all be-all. I want to tweak it for training camp. Training camp performances matter, but they aren't real. They aren't real. They're not even as useful as preseason games, because at least in the preseason, even if you're playing backups to the backups to the backups, it's game situations. It's concepts against players who don't know what's coming. And so maybe you could say, okay, it's better to go up against the number 1s for a different team in a joint practice than the number 2s, the number 3s in a preseason game. I'm potentially sympathetic to that idea. But training camp is not real. And one of the reasons why we know that is it varies so much day to day, but also it's scripted. It's sometimes designed to be specifically focused on a concept or a thing that guys trying to make the team can blow up because, hey, we're going to run the same play 5 times in a row and the defense knows what's coming. And sometimes an undrafted free agent trying to make the squad is going to blow up your ability to try and rep that thing. Or sometimes you practice something just to practice it. It's not real football yet, but it matters. And one of the reasons why I think this concept is important is it also ensures that if you believe it and if you follow it, it never lets you get too high or too low on any performance that's going on in camp. Because yes, it matters, but it's not real. So Jordan Love, day 1, goes 7 for 14, and there's going to be some cynics, some critics, some haters, some whatevers. And they're going to go, well, that tells us all we need to know about Jordan Love. And then the next day, he comes out and he's throwing lasers. He's throwing touchdowns in the red zone. He's beating Rasul Douglas to the corner to Christian Watson for 6. He's beating a inside-outside coverage with Devondre Campbell and the safety to Jayden Reed for a touchdown. He looks great. Those critics are silent. And I guess what I'm saying is they're both wrong because, yeah, it matters. It matters that he needed to work on the touch in the wind. That's something you have to fix. But that's not really a problem yet. It was a thing that one day. And some of this is just small sample size theater. But then the next day he plays great. Well, okay, it's really nice that he played great. It matters that he played great on day 2. But that's not real either. Because we're just talking about practice, man. When you come to the arena, you see me play, don't you? We're talking about practice, man. It's funny to me too. So we are, in fact, talking about practice, but it's not that it's pointless. I don't want to say that. It's not. It's, in fact, very meaningful. If the NFL, if coaches, if teams, if front offices didn't think it were meaningful, you wouldn't do it. You need these reps to develop the chemistry, to install concepts, to work them against live bodies, offensively and defensively. It all matters. It's not just evaluation time. It's learning time. It's instruction time. It's player development time. Teams now get a very limited window to work on development, to work on skills, to work on tackling, to work on rush lanes, to work on punching the ball out. Like, those are things that you just don't, over the course of a regular season, have a ton of time to practice. And so to get those opportunities now, you hope it matters. Now, it always seems to matter more for good teams because they're good, and so it doesn't really matter that much. Look, you can't ever know in the moment how much it's going to matter in the games. But the reason I'm bringing it up right now is a way of hedging, and in some ways it's an emotional hedge, but hedging the idea of the roller coaster, the training camp roller coaster that everyone can go on. And I always am doing my best to avoid telling anyone how to fan. I try not to do that. It bothers me when other people do it, the gatekeeping, all that stuff. I guess what I'm doing is just reminding you that we can't just dismiss the criticisms and only embrace the positives. Some of this is just like a logic thing. But there's a reason why. It's not just that we have to be fair, although it's probably, if you want to be right about this stuff, it's important to try and be fair. But it's more that just the day-to-day stuff, unless it accumulates, is not that big a deal. So one bad practice, not a big deal. One great practice, not a big deal. It does matter because it shows that you can put together a great practice, or it shows that, hey, you can have a bad practice, and guess what? Everyone can have a bad practice. Aaron Rodgers in his prime had bad practices. Patrick Mahomes probably has bad practices. There's the famous story. Early in his career, he didn't even know how to identify the mic. It's not a great practice. But eventually you get better and better and better, and you get to the place where you need to be. We've talked about this with Jordan Love and his development in particular, that this idea of this season, you want to see those high-end flashes. You want to see him have a great game. You want to see a game where he throws for 350 and 4. Doesn't have to do that every week, but if you see it once, two times, 3 times, 4 times, you go, hey man, that's in there. That's high-end stuff. That's awesome. So he has a day like Thursday, and you go, that's the quarterback he can be. And Russell Douglas talked about this after practice. He's a little bit more aggressive, letting it hang out a little bit more, being a little bit more confident because he's not in the shadow of Aaron Rodgers anymore. Doesn't have to walk on any eggshells, such that, by the way, that's not an Aaron Rodgers thing. That's just if you're the backup, the point is, part of the deal is you don't really try and make waves. Now, right? No one told Aaron Rodgers that the first time when he was a backup to Brett Favre, but most of the time, especially at the quarterback position where you're constantly being judged on, are you being a good teammate? Are you being a good soldier? All that stuff. generally the backup quarterback has to, relinquish that top end swagger role, all that stuff. There's a little bit of that. He's not doing that now. So it's great to see. It's great to see Jayden Reed have a day. Have them design some plays for him. That kind of thing. We're going to talk more about Jayden Reed coming up a little bit later. But it's great to take all this with a grain of salt. So get excited. I'm not telling anyone not to get excited. Jordan Love has a great day. Jayden Reed makes a couple of plays. Hell yeah, brother. Hell yeah. That's really cool. It matters that he can do that in both cases. But it's not real yet. It's not real yet. All right, I'm going to talk about a specific trend related to this Packers team and Matt LaFleur and Luke Musgrave, who is a part of this trend. We're going to talk about that in just a second here on Locked On Packers. Our partners at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Football host Vinny Iyer to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week, all season long. Whether you're prepping for a draft or scouting the waiver wire, every week we're going to provide you with players that are a guaranteed fit on your roster. So with draft prep underway for the upcoming season, let's see who Vinny has picked out on this week's eBay's Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Pick of the Week. When the top tier quarterbacks, they're off the board in fantasy football drafts in 2023, there's another line of luxury passers and runners who are guaranteed fit your starting lineups every week. The Bengals' Joe Burrow remains a classic pick in the top 6 QB1s for his prolific reliability in an offense with great weapons he knows so well. Had a calf injury. We'll see how long it keeps him out. Doesn't seem like Cincinnati's too concerned about it. Burrow will get it done again, humming along to big numbers in Cincinnati. With eBay Guaranteed Fit and over 122 million parts and accessories for your vehicle right at your fingertips, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. Air filters, brakes, batteries, taillights, alternators, shocks, struts, you name it, eBay Motors has it. And they'll make sure it's the right fit for your car because eBay Guaranteed Fit helps you understand exactly what part you need for your vehicle the first time. So go forth, switch gears, crank the AC, and say goodbye to sweating if your ride needs a little fixing up because now you know you'll always be set up for success from the get-go with eBay Guaranteed Fit. Everything your vehicle is calling for is just a click away. For the parts and accessories that fit your vehicle, just look for the green check. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices at ebaymotors.com. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers, eligible items only, and exclusions apply. Thanks for making Locked On Packers your first listen every day. Every dayers next week on the show. We are that much closer to preseason football, that much closer to family night, which will be here before you know it. That's all coming up on Locked On Packers. If you're more than 7 years old, you're old enough to remember Mike McCarthy and Ted Thompson, where every year they drafted guys and you knew essentially from draft day, they were starting right away because that was just what the Packers did. That's not what Matt LaFleur has done. And if you go back and look at these players, guys, and where they've been and when they've come into the league, the players who were drafted and became no doubt starters from day one, it's not a long list in the Matt LaFleur era. Now, if you want to extend it to the Brian Gutekunst era, I suppose you could. But the thing is, if you go back to 2018 with Jair Alexander, that's Mike McCarthy. And so this is part of the Mike McCarthy of it all. They were constantly having to put in rookies and get things squared away because Ted Thompson was just not going to do anything else. That's not been quite the case with Matt LaFleur, but almost every year there has been a guy like that, 2020 being the exception. 2019, everyone knew when they drafted Darnell Savage, he was going to start right away. They didn't have anyone else. Part of the thing about the Rashawn Gary draft pick was he's not going to start. And so you're using the 12th pick on a guy who's not going to start. That's crazy. And Darnell Savage, for all of the issues that he's had, started out a promising career. It's hard really to square the player that we saw 2019, 2020 with who he was in 2021, stretches in 2021, and then for most of 2022. You hope he can get back on track. 2021, we knew Eric Stokes at some point was going to start. He probably should have been starting from week 1. Wasn't. This is its own thing. We can have a discussion about Matt LaFleur and his coaching staff and holding on to veterans a little too long. Elton Jenkins, one of those guys. Lane Taylor, had to wait for Lane Taylor to get hurt to really grab that starting job. Elton Jenkins did. But Josh Myers, we knew when Josh Myers was drafted, he was going to walk into that center job. Corey Linsley already out the door. He's already in LA. Okay? Cool. So, Quay Walker, 2022. We kind of assumed Devontae Wyatt would be this guy, and he just wasn't. But Quay Walker, they said from the jump, he's going to change the way we play defense. He hasn't. Spoiler alert. Now, just a rookie, so plenty of opportunities there to add to his resume and to improve this team in ways that we haven't seen yet. I'm not ready to call him a bust yet. Josh Myers, is he even going to be on this team beyond this year? Is he going to play more than just his rookie contract? Is Darnell Savage going to be on this team in a year? I don't know. Quay Walker certainly did not light the world on fire as a rookie. So now you add Luke Musgrave. They're so excited about Luke Musgrave and what he can bring to this offense. Jordan Love raving about him. Matt LaFleur raving about him. And what I really liked, by the way, is Matt LaFleur was asked about those tight ends, about Tucker Kraft and Luke Musgrave, and he didn't open with they are incredibly physically gifted, because they are. But he said, they're so smart and they work hard. And that so often is the differentiating factor between guys that make it in this league and guys that don't. Everyone's talented. Everyone. These are 99th percentile S-tier athletes almost across the board. Everyone is physically gifted, incredible coordination and processing power, all that stuff. They fail because they get hurt, or they fail because they lack the desire to be great, or they can't overcome adversity. Steve Nash has talked about this, and that's why I don't want to be glib about this. Steve Nash has talked about one of the reasons why we miss on athletes is because we're really bad at predicting who's going to be able to overcome adversity. Sometimes it's not about a desire. Like, I'm sure you can think of times in your life where an obstacle is presented to you and you're like, damn, I'd really like to overcome this obstacle, but I just can't. Or I have this mental hurdle I can't get over. Or I have this physical setback and it's really hard for me to get my life together to overcome this. We can think of examples in Packers history. Someone like Eddie Lacy, he never loved football. That's not even a diss. It's not a drag. He just didn't. He said, I only watch football. I like to play football. But he also liked to do other things. Totally fine. But he starts to get hurt. That starts to affect his conditioning, his training, his body, all that stuff. And at a certain point, you just go, I don't love this game enough to put in the work. And by the way, again, that's fine. Go be happy doing something else. God bless. I don't mean that to criticize him. But that's what happened. And so when you have that work ethic, and not just work ethic, but that desire, it's got to be a desire. You have to want to do it. It is something that I have learned over the course of my life, that to do anything really, really well, it's going to take a lot of work. And if you want to be great at it, you have to embrace the work. And if you're not going to do that, then you either need to be okay being mediocre at that thing or find something else. And look, someone like Blake Martinez, another great Packers example, he decided, I'm done with football, started a Pokemon business, and man, he's going gangbusters. And he said it. My back doesn't hurt. My body's not sore all the time. I'm not worried about head injuries. I'm Gucci. And I'm making money on Pokemon. God bless. Go do it. Having two guys who are, at least at this moment, locked in and have all those physical tools, that's the gold mine. That's not proof that Luke Musgrave is going to succeed, but it's a good starting point. It's a really good starting point. And I'm not ready to say that like those being in that position and having to be thrust into that moment as a rookie is bad. But I do think it is a reminder that when you draft for need, that's when bad things can happen. I think they missed on their eval of Josh Myers. I think they drafted him because he seemed pro-ready. They drafted Mario Rodgers because he seemed pro-ready. They missed. We've talked about this on this show that when they've gone outside their profile to draft someone, they've tended to miss, which is, by the way, a historically supported thing that happens in the NFL. So don't do that. Now, Luke Musgrave, elite athlete. I don't think they went outside their profile. Quay Walker, elite athlete, big time pedigree, big time program. I don't think they went outside their profile for that. Now, you could say they went outside their positional value profile, but like they've done this before. When you draft for need, you can get yourself in trouble because you start reaching. I don't think that's what they did for Luke Musgrave. I think they valued him really, really highly. There were plenty of people that thought he was a top 50 talent. And Dane Brugler said it, the Athletic draft guy said, look, if Luke Musgrave doesn't get hurt this past season, there's no way the Packers are in a position to draft him where they did. He's going in the first round. There were some people that thought he was going to go in the first round. That's the kind of talent they were able to get. Doesn't mean he's going to succeed because they've been down this road before. All right, I want to finish up with something that Matt LaFleur said that is in a way related to Luke Musgrave and also Jayden Reed. That was the prompt of the question. We're going to get to that in just a second. Thanks for making Locked On Packers your first listen every day. Everydayers, go check out what we're doing over at The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Because I just had a piece come out today. In fact, so some really interesting things about training camp and stuff going on right now. This is a great time to be a new subscriber to The Leap and also Locked On Sports Today. It's all the big stories in sports in under 20 minutes. You can get that wherever you get podcasts. So Matt LaFleur was asked about Jayden Reed and prepping him to play potentially multiple positions. And the question was, do you have to start him somewhere and then go, or do you have to try and get him to teach all the positions? And I thought Matt LaFleur had a fascinating answer. Here it is.
I think it's more a process where we work toward it, but he's very capable. I think, that kind of, I don't know what the word is. It gets kind of over-exaggerated because I think that within our offense, there's enough flexibility within the formations that you have to know basically every spot because the way we teach is more conceptually based. So, hey, here's a 2x2 concept, here's a 3x1 concept, knowing that I could fit anywhere within that concept. Now, where you see these guys take maybe the next step is, okay, I know where the F fits within that concept, but can I, within the same day, go play Z or X? And that's where it kind of gets a little bit more complex, I would say. But ultimately, they'd have to know the concept and could be at any of those spots.
The reason I bring this up, and the reason I think it is so interesting, is it is a very, very modern way of thinking about the game. It's not, okay, your X, your Y, your Z, your F, they're in these positions and they do these things. Although when you look at a concept, it is still going to look like that. But to say, this concept is a 2x2 concept. It's a 3x1 concept. And we may ask you to play the X. We may ask you to play the Z. You need to learn the concept. You need to know what the backside single receiver is doing. You need to know all three concepts on the front side to the trip side. Or when you've got 2 and 2, same thing. You got to know what the strong side of the formation is doing. You got to know what the weak side of the formation is doing. And so I can throw a running back in any of those spots. I can throw a tight end in any of those spots. I can throw a receiver in any of those spots. And perfect example is the touchdown Jayden Reed caught. You have 11 personnel on the field, tight end wide to the right, running back wide to the left. Against a zone team, you're occupying corners. You've got a running back matched up with a corner. You've got a tight end matched up with a corner, which means you've got Jayden Reed. Now, if you're getting zone coverage, you're not truly matched up, right? But that's not the point here. So now you have Jayden Reed, who is in the slot on this play. Devondre Campbell has to carry him up the field. And that's just a bad matchup. But Jayden Reed could just as easily play on the outside or on the inside. Or you could run that same concept from 12 personnel, where instead of Aaron Jones, that's Tucker Kraft. Or you could run it from a 4 receiver set. You could run it from 10. You could run it from 21. You could run it from any personnel group, because what the Packers expect is you just know the concept. And so you know, okay, outside receiver on the strong side does this, inside receiver does this. And so now you can mix and match. You can play with formations. You can play with personnel. You can do all these different things to run the same concept, same formation even. But you can use different personnel, so you never become predictable. The illusion of complexity. It starts early. All right, back next week. A lot more here on Locked on Packers. We're going to have a Summer Friday next week, I think. But plenty of stuff to talk about when it comes to this Packers team. It's never a dull moment, right? Never a dull moment. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked on Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts, you will find Locked on Packers. And anytime you want to come hang out with us live on our Instagram feed, again, you can't do that, not on Instagram, but on YouTube you can. YouTube Live. Should I do an Instagram Live? Nah, we're not going to do that. Our YouTube feed, so you can stay Locked on Packers.